I go. Greetings. Welcome. Happy Sunday to each and every one of you. And as always, we are certainly hopeful that you are maintaining your highest level of physical, mental, and spiritual well being, family. So we want to welcome all family, friends, even enemies that tune in, because they do tune in. And we want to welcome you to this important topic that we have today based on the book that I recently published, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, Organizing 101, Step One, How to Begin. And as is the case every week, these weekly workshops are sponsored by our organization, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And we are happy to have you here with us for this broadcast. And we want to tell you that this topic matter, taking segments from the book and breaking them down, we're going to do that for 3 or 4 consecutive weeks. This is the first week. So this is step one. And the reason why we say how to begin, you all, is because we're really today going to be talking about what kind of foundation you need to build to do organizing work for justice with people in neighborhoods. So we're not going to talk today about, it's not going to be a thing where you participate for an hour and when it's over, you're going to know how to organize a revolution, because it obviously doesn't work like that. What we're going to lay out today are what are the things that you need to have in place before you even begin? What do you need to have in place before you even begin? And then once we establish that today, the next week we're going to come back with step 2, and we're going to talk next week about how you begin to work, the things you do to recruit people in the neighborhoods, what your approach to people is, all of those things, the actual beginning steps of how you start the work. And then we're going to build from there. So we're so happy to have you with us. And as always, we start by giving thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. This is their land that we occupy, and we are thankful to them for 529 years of resistance and for permitting us, because that's exactly what's happening, because this does not belong to you. I don't care how much you think it is, or whether you think because you were born here, you have some claim to it, or they always tell you that it's your country, or whatever the dysfunction is. This is stolen land that you're on. And so that means it will forever belong to the people who it was stolen from. And that's the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the true indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the American Indian people and their descendants, the Chicanos, the Mexicanos, the Puerto Ricanos, not anybody else, not any of the confused Africans who disrespect our ancestors, our African ancestors, by claiming that we've always been here. And for those people that believe that, or anybody you know that believes that we've always been in the Western Hemisphere, we have no connection to Africa. What we would like to ask from you is that all of you all are spending all this money with these multinational corporations, finding out your DNA history. So where are all the YouTube videos for all of you that claim you've always been in the Western Hemisphere, you have no connection to Africa? Where are all your YouTube videos, since YouTube is your PhD school? Where are those videos that are showing you having complete history in the Western Hemisphere with no connection to Africa? It would seem to me like, for as much as people claim that, they would be running over their shoelaces, getting that evidence out there. Like, here's my test. I've always been here. I'm connected to this hemisphere. But with you people paying these people for these tests, you're coming back with the results. Your people are from various parts of Africa, which is what we've always told you. And not only are you from Africa, but Africa is so critical to where you're going. So we don't disrespect our ancestors here. We know that if you're here today, it's because one of your ancestors stood up and took a weapon for you so that you could be here. That's the only reason why you're here today. And anybody that doesn't understand that is just being so disrespectful. And we don't tolerate disrespect for our mother, and our mother is Africa, and we don't tolerate disrespect for our ancestors. So we honor our African ancestors, and we thank them for allowing us to be here. And we will start today with our brief introductions, as we always do. My name is Ajamu, longtime organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party all over the world, and we'll continue that work for as long as I'm able. And with me is my wonderful, amazing daughter, Shakura, who grew up in the APRP's Young Pioneer Institute program. And Shakura told me recently that she had watched a movie with an indigenous family, father and daughter. And in that movie or television show, the daughter and the father had some sort of conflict, and the daughter asked the father, "Are we okay?" And Shakur told me the father responded, "Even when we're not okay, we're still okay." And Shakur felt that scene and said that it reminded her of you and I. And I agree wholeheartedly. We're not perfect, you all. You know, we're human beings like you are, and you know you're not perfect. So I don't know why you would think anyone else is. So we're not perfect, but what we do strive to do is struggle to prioritize our humanity as a family and as people of the human society. And we really struggle to elevate that. And in this society, in this world today, where they want to tell you that there are no African fathers, there are no African fathers raising their children, there are no children that respect their African fathers. We are here today, as we're here every week, to demonstrate to you that that's another lie that imperialism tells, and that we are a strong unit, father, daughter, and we will continue to do that. Whether anybody else recognizes it or not, that's your issue. We will continue to demonstrate our love for each other, which we manifest through this work. Because as Che Guevara said, you have to base this work in love. And that's a central part of what we're going to be talking about, because you can't organize anybody if you're not doing it from a position of love. Okay. And so just really briefly back to the APRP, our objective, you all, is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa. Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. And the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, written by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968, when he called for the creation of an all-African People's Revolutionary Party. And he said that that would happen through the unification of all Pan-African formations on the ground who agree with the objective of one unified socialist Africa. You see some of the logos of the many parties, not all of them, but some of them on the ground throughout the African continent, who accept that definition for Pan-Africanism and who are fighting for it. And we are united with them in waging that fight for one worldwide unified fighting force for Pan-African revolution and unity. And we are dedicated to that. Shakur and I are dedicated to that. Africans all over the planet are dedicated to that. And as it says, we have chapters all over the world. It's my plan at the end of this summer to travel to Southern Africa to do work in one of the organizing areas that we operate in. And so look forward to doing that. And just again, glad to have you all here with us. So to get us started again, laying the foundation for organizing work in neighborhoods based on the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacists, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. To get us started, I turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you so much, Daddy. Yes. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, greetings. And so thank you for bringing that up, because that scene just always resonates with me, just in terms of how poor people and people of color are just able to still try to find a way to unite as a family because they understand the value in family. So, whether you're taking a proverb from an African language or whether you're taking something from an indigenous language, just this continued notion of understanding that family is everything. Even though it's a colonized language, I always love the Spanish phrase, la familia es todo, meaning that's all you have is family, right? And so I love that scene where he says, even when we're not, we're okay, because that's another strategy we need to move forward. And my dad has spoke to this in a couple of seminars in the past that we've given about how we have to figure out, maybe as people of color or maybe as poor people or colonized people, we have to figure out how do we work through our challenges and our differences that come up as we work in organizing spaces or even in non-organizing spaces, because those same challenges and differences have driven us apart, which interrupts this process of organizing, right? So just like La Familia es Todo, we have to figure out how can we still work together and figure out, even if it's professional working together, because you could still not like someone and still organize with them, because it's really not about whether or not you like them or not. It's about putting your ideas together so that oppressed people don't have to be oppressed anymore. And how do you reach that level of maturity to do that? That's what I'm hoping we can try to unpack today, as we talk about what are the primary and preliminary and mature steps that a person would take in order to get that started. So I'm actually going to be teaching directly from the book. So if you have your book tonight, I'm going to reference a couple of page numbers and hopefully you'll be able to access them. And then, just a quick shout out to accessing the book. If you have not already checked out the link on Amazon, you can purchase it on Amazon, either a hardback copy for $8 or a virtual copy, ebook copy for $5. And so please make sure you order your books because it might be helpful for those of you that want to look at what we're talking about as we're talking about it. You can pull directly from the text, just like we're doing with these seminars. So pulling from page 29, page 29 reminds us that oppression is everywhere for African people. Capitalism and imperialism will continue to reinforce that poor people and people of color do not matter. More poor people of color will continue to be murdered at the hands of the system and police. The latest report includes Dante Wright in New York, Adam Toledo in Chicago, Anthony Thompson Jr. here in Tennessee, and Micaiah Bryant in Ohio. What is the typical response when an African youth is murdered? Marches, protests, and organized gatherings, which, as Kwame Ture argued, quote, some organization is better than no organization, end quote. So we argue this is a great first step if you were to attend marches, protests, and organized gatherings. But this step is not sustainable or long term. We need steps that are going to be viable to help us reach the optimal revolution goal. Joining a march or a protest is a good choice, but a majority of people are not involved with organizations. Marches are about making a demand without the control of having the control for the outcome. The opposite is involvement in an organization when an outcome is something sustainable that the people can not only determine with their own collective resources, but also be able to manifest themselves because they themselves are in the driving force to make that outcome a reality. When this happens, collectivism becomes the foundational practice and the built foundation of how it becomes structured. So how do we go about building something beyond making a demand? You might be asking yourself, how do I get people to work with me in building a capacity? Find a common ground with people to get the ball rolling. If you are familiar with union recruitment, labor union recruitment, it is much like that. So what you want to try to do for those that are unfamiliar is just like if you're trying to increase membership for a labor union, or if you're trying to figure out how to start an organization that is working for justice, it first starts with having a conversation. It seems really, really simple, but that's actually one of the most difficult things a person can do because that is how you're going to try to establish a relationship with someone. And so you try to establish a relationship with people whose paths you cross through asking them and talking to them about inhumane situations. So maybe you see someone at a rally and you walk up to them and say, how are you feeling about the fact that this is yet another youth of color or African youth that is being murdered? Or what type of books are you reading right now? What do you think we should be doing? Do you think that there's more that we could be doing? I think X, Y, and Z, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And again, for those of us that aren't really comfortable just bluntly coming out and talking to people because maybe we identify as introvert or maybe we identify as extrovert, but we're still not comfortable talking to people, that's going to be the challenge for us because we're going to have to be uncomfortable. And we've said this last week and we've said it before in other seminars. The only way that struggle can actually take place and get us to an outcome that we deem necessary is because all of us are going to have to reach a level of uncomfortability in order to make change occur so that it can affect us on a mass ground level. So that means talking to people that you don't know. That means talking to people that you've never spoke to in your life. That means talking to people in public spaces where other people might potentially hear your conversations and join in and derail what it is you're trying to do. Now, you can try to control the situation as much as you can, but you are going to have to be vulnerable in order to make that ask and also to be able to establish how you're going to go from there in terms of following up with that person and trying to build something deeper than that. Right now, what I'm talking about is essentially just planting a seed. My godfather says that a dream is nothing but a seed. And so basically, by you establishing this relationship with that person, you are trying to help them understand that you too see the inhumane injustices and you are outraged as well. And you understand that although marches and protests are a good first step, as I said, they're not the end all be all. And they're certainly not long term and they're certainly not sustainable. And we don't control the ability to continue having marches and protests because now there's all these cities that have curfews. So now the police are harassing us on top of the normal harassment they're already doing for us to not be in the streets after a certain time. So again, we need something that is feasible, that is viable, and that is sustainable, that we are in control of. Because when we have the means to figure out how we want to navigate said resource or tool, then we're more equipped to apply it and to execute it however we see fit, as opposed to having someone tell us that our march needs to end or having someone tell us that we need to leave a space or a scene. Okay, so you're meeting people on the street. Maybe you're meeting them at events. Maybe you're seeing people post things on virtual spaces and chats, and you're following up with them privately. In talking to people, you'll start to draw out commonalities and find reasons to build connections among one another. People can usually tell you about a problem, but the tricky part is I am asking you all not just to talk about the problem, but to consider trying to develop some critical analysis of what the solution to the problem can be. And as we know, anyone in this chat or on this Facebook Live can tell us, we need less police to be racist and patriarchal, and we need to give the indigenous people their land back, and we need to make sure that poor people have access to living wages where they work. These are all things that we all know, and if you don't, you accidentally joined the wrong Zoom by mistake. So these are things that we all know, but those are all problems. How do we actually address those things? What are some feasible solutions that we can apply to make those problems not be problems anymore? So that's what we make an ask of you today, is if you are interested in starting an organization, not just are you talking about the problems, but you're essentially trying to help pull out or flush out or tease out whatever solutions you think could be a possibility of that. And that's not really a common practice that our society trains us to do. So again, that's going to ask you to be a little uncomfortable, and it might even be uncomfortable to the other person, because the other person might hear you say, what are some solutions do you think that could be applied? And they still will continue to talk about the problem because we haven't shifted our brains to understand that we can actually do something about this. Again, we are socialized to understand that this is just what it is. We just have to accept it, and there is nothing we can do to change it. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. And if you don't believe me, you can literally pick up the manifesto, or you can pick up Handbook for Revolutionary Warfare. You could pick up any of the books that we have cited since we started this seminar over a year ago. And you could literally just read some examples from the timeline, because our ancestors have already showed us the way. All we have to do is ask them and ask them to guide us once again. They've already written it out. All we have to do is pick up what they've written and follow it. And so that means asking people to discuss and describe what solution should be for a problem, which means you're being critical together as you think about how to solve these inhumane situations. Next slide, please. So now you started some type of conversation, and you want to make sure that you're thinking about how you are representing this conversation. What do I mean by that? I mean, before you have the conversation, or maybe as you're having it, make sure you're thinking about where you are mentally in recruiting for the work study or the organization that you're recruiting for. So be clear about why you're doing what you're doing. If you're striking up a conversation with someone, understand why you're doing it, and make sure that you yourself are in a space where you can come off as being optimistic because you do believe in the revolution. If you don't, then you might risk coming off as pessimistic or indifferent. And how do you think that's going to affect whoever you're talking to, but also your ability to have the established credibility to start an organization? When the person you're talking to can tell from your behavior or from your tone or from your how you say what you say, and then your body language and your gestures, in addition to that, they can tell that you don't believe in actually accomplishing anything. They might be able to tell that you don't believe in the revolution. They might be able to tell that you don't believe that we can actually change the conditions that we live in. And so if you are coming off to them, telling them that you want to start an organization, but your body language, your gestures are indicating the opposite of that message, how confusing is that going to be when you try to communicate that to that person? And most importantly, is that going to be a missed opportunity where an organization could have been started, but you weren't self-aware to understand how you were coming off. So now it's a missed opportunity and it's long gone. Be mindful of that and think about that. Do you believe in the people? Do you believe in the work? Do you believe the desired outcome can be accomplished? I think you really have to ask yourself those questions, because our society does an impeccable job of reminding us every single day that we just need to accept the conditions and not dare try to push against them. My dad has said countless times, in any of these racially based movies or TV show or television dramas that we have witnessed, Queen and Slim or 12 Years a Slave or Antebellum, any one of those examples, they always show you that when you do try to push up against the system, you will die. And so you have to think about, for those of you that are in your 30s, that means for 3 decades, that message has been drilled into your brain. That means you have not only accepted it on a mental level, but your soul has accepted it. So you have to push against that, you all. You have to be brave enough to push against that. And you have to let other people know by being persuasive that you can push against it. Why? Because it's not true. We can change anything that we want to change. Again, if you are unclear about that, look at the evidence from the past. Our ancestors have fought long and hard, and they are still fighting to this day, fighting right now as we speak to resist colonists that are coming into countries trying to take over. So we have to be very mindful as we think about that in terms of how we're coming across to people. Whether you believe it or not, your natural attitude will come out as you speak to the masses. So whichever narrative you feel about achieving the revolution, that will be embedded in your action. So be mindful of that, because that's power. And if you use that power incorrectly, it can ruin an opportunity. And then you have to work twice as hard to try to rebuild that established credibility, because you lost it by not being self-aware. This also means that we need to begin to learn of others in terms of what suggested outcomes from the problems at hand are. And that means we need to start asking others to describe what their vision is. What do I mean by that? Your vision is your solution. Your vision is what you plan to do to make the circumstances better. So we need to make the ask of people about their vision outlooks that resemble how we can try to share whatever our solution and vision is with them. And as that conversation continues, it's going to slowly start to move in a certain direction. So you want to try to guide the conversation to make sure that you're focusing the conversation on figuring out how to align the two visions and make them connect, or the three visions, however many people are in that conversation. That connection is really important, because this exchange of vision dialogue will kind of help develop your overall collective idea. And from there, you all can decide what the plan is going to be on how you're going to make the vision be executed. Okay. And in doing that, you're building trust with the people by asking them to share some problems that exist. You all are building a relationship. There's some dependability that's happening. And again, borrowing from labor union scripts, part of this means practicing what we call in the labor union the 75-15. So 75% of what you're doing is listening to the people you're approaching and asking to talk about the problems. And 15% of that is talking, because it really is about hearing from them so that you can see what they describe to be problems. And then that's how you have your ammo to help encourage them and remind them, well, you said that this, and this was a problem. You know what? My family member, my comrade, we have 3 organizations that all focus on all 3 of those issues you just talked about. And we could join one of those 3, or we could start one that addresses all of them. So you're able to take information from them because you're listening. And I don't know about you all, but listening is a really hard action to do. Like, it is one of the hardest things if you really think about it, because again, we're socialized to be individualistic. So our opinions are more important than the other people we are talking to. But in reality, if we listen, we would actually get so much farther in life, because there's information out there that we don't have access to. And when people are willing to give it to us, we should be humbled that they're willing to give it to us and take it, and then use it as necessary to build solutions so that oppressed people are not oppressed anymore. So you're doing the 75-15, and when you're trying to identify your vision, it aligns with their vision. So how can the vision be fixed? What are some collective tweaks that can be done? Can you all see some things that need to be can you all see some things that need to be tweaked along with that? Or is there an estimated amount of time for the vision to be accomplished? Is that a vision that can happen in a year's time? Is that a vision that can happen in 5 years? Once you discuss the problem and the collective vision, that's when the spark can ignite. The argument is supposed to be, I'm sorry, this argument is supported on page 30 and is important because once that spark ignites, you are essentially discussing the problem and the potential solution. Why is this important? This is very critical for people to see that they are in control of changing their situation. So we're doing some reverse teaching of society, you all. That's very heavy. And I gave you the example of the millennial earlier. So 3 decades, if a person is in their 40s, that's 4 decades, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of work to do to reverse that narrative, but it can be done. So essentially, you're helping them understand they are in control of changing their situations. This epiphany contradicts all the teachings of capitalism and imperialism, and that makes people believe that things are set in stone and that there is no way for things to get better. However, organizing and effective organizations always make things better for the masses. Next slide, please. All right, so the timeline of organizing has shown us that building organizations or work studies starts actually with just a couple of people. So I don't want you to think you need 50 people. I don't want you to think you need 100 people. I don't want you to think you need 6 people. You just need 2 able bodies who are interested. And by able, I mean able as in they're able to be open mentally. I did not mean physically, because we accept all people who want to work for the revolution, no matter what shape or form they come in. So just to be clear, able is in they're willing to have a growth mindset and they're interested in taking a step into a new vulnerable situation. I'll give you some quick examples. The first work study, again, reference from the book on page 11. So the very first work study for the AAPRP included 4 people: Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Ture, and Lamin Janka. So another example, the Black Panther Party started with 6 brothers, and they were all in Huey P. Newton's backyard. Okay, so just in case this was kind of too much for you, I'm just giving this to you again in 5 steps so that you can just kind of see it laid out in a different space. So step 1, you need to start your organization with a collective vision with other like-minded people. And so that means having this conversation and being brave enough to go up and strike up the conversation. Step 2, you're establishing the plan to reach the vision, strategic methods to get this vision into a reality. Step 3, what does this organization want to focus on? That's the question you and the other organizer need to ask yourselves. How will this vision be accomplished? What is the realism of reaching this goal as a whole? And do you have reading lists, discussions? Do you have assigned assignments and worksheets that people can do? Are there any writing analysis that you all want to incorporate, just so you can look at how something was written and see what it means to one person versus another? Step 4, you have to collectively decide on your meeting times, your meeting locations. Are you going to do virtual? Are you going to do in person? Are you going to alternate based on what's happening with the pandemic? Are you going to pick locations that are outside, but you need to be making sure that they're covered, because weather permitted might affect your meeting, and you want to be as organized as possible about all of these single details. And I know it seems like, oh my gosh, that is way too specific. Actually not. This step is critical because Kwame Ture taught us that organization decides everything. So the more you flesh out details that need to be established, that'll help make the process less stressful and more attainable. And most importantly, it won't derail you and get you off track for obtaining sustainable organizing tactics and methods. All right. And the last step, step 5, is you want to strategize with others in your organization about ways to recruit more people from the neighborhood. So you go back to the previous slide about how you're building these relationships and having those initial conversations with new people by discussing social issues. And again, you're building trust by listening more than talking, and you're trying to meet on common ground with the same accord of agreement. My grandfather to this day reminds me that a good listener will go far. And that is how I'm going to close out my slides for today. Thank you all so much. I believe in you, and I can't wait to hear all about the organizations you all are starting.
Thank you, Shakura. Appreciate you laying out that wonderful foundation. And before we go farther, I just want to read a couple of the comments that are coming in. Good comrade Yolanda wrote Ganeshish, which I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but we do study enough of our indigenous family members to know that that means gratitude for what we're doing. So we appreciate you saying that to us. And our comrade, our APRP comrade, Evan, on the East Coast of this plantation, said that the conversation part is definitely the difficult part, the tough part. And he also talked about the Zapatistas having a similar focus on listening. And so we thank you, comrade, for that. And I want to actually start my section on what you said about the difficulty of listening, because I know that a lot of you who, you go out and you do organizational work, getting back to what Shakur talked about having one or two other people and the focus being on the vision and not on how many people you have. And I can tell you a lot of you struggle to do work because you're getting these steps out of position and you're not understanding how to implement them. Like you're saying, I'm trying to do this work and you need to help me. And a lot of people hear you and they want to help you, but they don't understand what role they would play in doing that. And nobody wants to feel and look like a fool, so they don't make a move. Whereas if you take a different approach than that, and your approach is what Shakur talked about, where you're coming in and you're talking to people about vision, and you're doing that to flush it out so that you can make sure what you're seeing in the horizon is the same thing they're seeing in the horizon. And once you establish that you both are seeing the same thing in the horizon, you don't have to ask them to work with you. That's already going to be assumed based on the level of conversation you are both are having, that you need to work together to make this happen. But it's going to start again with what we're talking about, like where you're at. Because if you're at a place of impatience and elitism, you don't feel like anybody sees it the way you see it, which that's elitist, whether you want to admit it or not, because none of us are any smarter than anyone else. None of us are any more talented than anyone else. This is a question of opportunity and access. That's all it is. Everybody, I don't care what you think you're able to do or not, has a talent that can contribute towards the liberation of the planet. That's unquestionable. Nobody can question that. So nobody is in a position to be like, well, how come they can't understand what I understand? Because somebody understands something you don't understand. And this might be one of those things, how you connect with people to get them to work with you for your vision. And I'm saying that because I have 37 years in the same organization. And in that time, I have effectively recruited people who have been in the organization pretty much as long as I have. So from the very time that I began, all the way to people I've recruited just in the last month or so, and all the way in between. And so these practices that I've written in the book are reflections of those experiences and understanding how to learn to have the conversations with people that Shakur talked about. So it's important to remember that it doesn't matter how many people you have. People are so hung up on that because capitalism is all about quantity. So if you don't have quantity, then that has to mean that what you're doing doesn't have significance. And you have to put everything on the table and understand that we are fighting against all the values that we learn from this system. So how many people you start out with is not the critical point, you all. What's important is that you establish what your vision is. What are you trying to achieve? Like Shakur said, not just what the problem is, but what are you trying to work for? Clearly understanding what that means, not just understanding it on a surface level. Like there have been a lot of so-called solutions that are really surface level oriented. Like, not to disrespect anybody, but just for example, like the concept that we're going to get free by joining the Democratic Party, voting in the Democratic Party, getting people elected in the Democratic Party, that's going to get us free. Clearly, that solution has never been thoroughly thought through by the people who believe it. Those of us who know that that's not our solution have thought it through. But I have never talked to anybody and I have a master's degree in political science and economics. So I've had plenty of these conversations over the years, and I'm a political organizer. So I've had plenty of these conversations over the years with people. Believe me, thousands of these conversations. And I've talked to countless people who believe that narrative I just put out there. I've never met a single person who can give me a concrete strategy of how we gain power through the Democratic Party. Nobody can give me a strategy. Not even Martin Luther King had a strategy for achieving that, even though that was the path that he was engaged in terms of his mobilization work. And those of you listening who are in the Democratic Party, you cannot articulate. I challenge you to articulate right now how we as African people, as indigenous people, as poor people are going to get free in the Democratic Party in the capitalist system. You cannot do it. And I'm not attacking your credibility or your sincerity. I'm sure you're credible and sincere. Otherwise, you would not be here. But what I'm saying to you is that we do not know how to think these things through and come up with solutions that are based in our culture and our experience. That's the point. If you can't see that and you're taking it personal, then you need to just take a deep breath and get yourself together, because we're trying to get free. We don't have any time for sentimentality. We're trying to get free. So I'm pointing out a legitimate political contradiction. And so we have to understand these things, you all, and accept them. And so we start with how many people we can get. And it can be one or two people. Like Shakur said, the Black Panther Party was 6 people in Huey's mother's backyard. The APRP was 4 people in Villa Sila in Guinea Conakry. The Cuban Revolution, the grandma crashed in the Caribbean Sea, and they started the Cuban Revolutionary Guerrilla War with 11 people, you all. Now that's a country of 11 million people now. So they started like 10 million people short, but they did the work and they built that up. And so you've got to understand that. Don't worry about how many people you got. Just make sure you focus on what your vision is. First thing, what are you fighting for? You know, we spend so much time angry and frustrated that we don't spend any time sitting down and logically thinking through what is the solution to all of this. So you got to spend time doing that, and you got to write it down. You can't just get high one afternoon and think it through while you're high, and then the next morning you forgot all about it. You got to be scientific and write it down and have it and go back and edit it and develop it, so that if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to anyone else. But you got to do that first. That's the first thing you got to do. And once that's done, then your objective has to be supported by a process that develops it. So, like I just told you, 37 years in this organization, we have an objective. It's Pan-Africanism. I have had this conversation with hundreds of thousands of people. That is no exaggeration. In 37 years, I've had that. I've done that. And I haven't met a single person that's been able to tell me, well, Pan-Africanism will not work because of this. It will not work because of that. Why? Because I've spent that entire time studying, struggling with my comrades, getting a better understanding, going to Africa, doing the work on the ground there, going in neighborhoods here, doing the work in the book that we're talking about on the ground here, testing these things, testing these theories, making changes, because I'm not dogmatic. If something doesn't work, then I'm able to say, okay, that needs to be adjusted. We need to try this instead. So after going through that process, this is why we arrived where we're at now. But none of that would happen without these foundational tools in place. So we recognize a lot of you think when we say political education, we're just talking about reading books, because that's your only level of understanding about it. But that is not just what we're talking about. That's one part of it. Yes, you certainly read books. You do that. But you also have criticism, self-criticism, where you're allowing yourself to utilize a tool that's designed to assess you and your development or lack of development, and to provide you honest feedback as to how you need to make changes to get better. That's what that's designed to do. So you study, and then you struggle to get better. You raise the bar. And then you have democratic centralism, which is a vehicle for you to make collective democratic decisions as a collective, not just as an individual. That's something we have to learn, because we don't know how to do that. We're used to just thinking what we think, as Shakur said, what we think is what's more important. And clearly, you know, the saying 2 heads are better than one is correct. The more people we have, that are thinking about things, the more that we're debating things with people, the sharper our analysis is going to be. That's why work study is such a critical tool, because you're reading, but you're not just going based on what you read. You're taking what you read and you're sharing it with others, and they're challenging some of the backward things that you don't even recognize you believe. And then you have your criticism, self-criticism. And so if you take all these things seriously, it'll make you a stronger, better person. And the people you're working with, one or two other people, it'll do the same for them. And so once this process plays out, now you've got three dedicated and serious people. And if you don't think that with three or two dedicated and serious people with the same vision and a plan for how they're going to carry out their work cannot begin to do amazing things, I would say that's because you have never done anything. Because if you had done anything, you would know that me saying that is 100% correct. That two people on the same page, dedicated and serious, cannot be stopped with what they want to accomplish, cannot be derailed, cannot be put aside and defeated if they have those principles in place. And so that's what we're talking about, is the type of foundation you need. And most of us, we don't have all of that function. We've never even really had a conversation with a single person about our vision and what we want to do. We just keep telling people what we expect them to do, and then we don't understand why they don't respond, because they don't know what the hell you're talking about. So this is why we're saying it like this, loved ones, even enemies, because there's enemies on here. The enemies, I wish you would make a comment. You know what we're saying is correct, because that's what you do. That's why you've been able to oppress us so effectively for 529 years, because you know how to do these things that we're talking about. But you want to make sure that we don't learn how to do them. But that's what we're here to do, is make sure we exactly know how to put these pieces in place, so that we can surely, as the sun follows the moon, become free. So once all of these pieces are in place and we're doing this, we have the vision, the plan, we have our one or two people, and we have all of that supported by a strong political education process, right? Then what begins to happen, as I mentioned, is that a foundation is created. And now with all of that functioning, what will begin to happen is you're going to have a really higher bar of operation. You're going to have accountability with each other. You don't even have to say it. It's just going to happen based on you doing all these things. Because why? Because everybody's going to be invested in the work. It's not just going to be your work and people helping you. Because the problem with that is the people helping you are only invested in you. And then when you fail, which you're going to do because you're human, then they're going to be disillusioned and they're no longer want to do the work. And this is what happens all the time. If you do the work, you see this all the time. So we know that's not an effective model for moving forward. So that's why the vision is so critical, and the political education to bolster the vision is so critical. The plan is important to carry out the vision is so critical. And when you're all of the components of the political education strengthen your ability to carry out the plan to achieve the vision. And so if you're doing all that, it's going to create that accountability and that high bar that you have. And that's how camaraderie becomes so much more than just a word. Now it becomes you're working with people who are closer to you than your biological family. You're working with people that are closer to you than anyone. You're working with people that you trust. You're working with people that you would never sell out. You're working with people that you would never sell short. You're working with people that you don't want to disappoint. You're working with people that you don't want to leave stranded in the work. And once you reach that level of consciousness, you see what I'm saying, I'm sure, if you're paying attention. There's no force on earth that's going to be able to stop you. No force on earth that's going to be able to do it. So again, before beginning, here are the initial benchmarks that we want to make sure that we have. And I just want to look and see, because there are, some comments coming through. We have Danita, thank you, saying thank you for putting these vital trainings together. Absolutely. We appreciate you. We are here to do this work. Thank you. And so before beginning initial benchmarks, we say again, make sure that you prioritize grounding the foundational points in independence from the capitalist system. Your work has to be based in independence from the capitalist system. It has to be based in that. And we have other comments of agreement. We appreciate you all from our folks on Zoom as well as the other platforms. And yes, this is so important, you all, because this so much gets lost. Because, like was said during Shakur's presentation, we are so propagandized by the capitalist system. We're so propagandized that even people that consider themselves radical, when we get in difficult work circumstances, we revert back to our training under the capitalist system. Well, what we need to do is hold police accountable. The hell we do. That's not what we're trying. We need to eliminate police. We need to eliminate all police. Stop talking about, well, my father's a police and he's good. My husband, my wife. Well, I don't even, if I were you, I would be too embarrassed to even mention that, because your family members being in those agencies has done nothing to stop them from oppressing our people and our communities. So I don't know why the hell you keep bringing that up like that's supposed to be some kind of solution or some way to make us feel better about police existing. Human social existence and social interaction has been around for a minimum of 200,000 years. Police, which evolved from the slave patrols, have been around 150 years. So I don't know why some of us are so confused that we think we cannot exist without police. That makes no sense whatsoever. And those of you saying that are just, you just been thoroughly propagandized by our enemies. That's all that is, because history does nothing to complete your analysis. Your analysis makes no sense. Police have not even been around for a fraction of history. So that is insane to say that we have to have police. We don't have to have police, and we shouldn't have police. But if you don't have a foundation independent of the capitalist system in your work, you will have people that will begin to say things like that. And then now you'll have to spend all this time debating that, when up front you should have established, this is what we're doing. We are not calling the police. When we engaged in work, when I was in Oregon, and we had done work for one of the anti-racist organizations there, we would go to towns and they would do work in those small towns in Oregon. And you know, Oregon's as racist as they come. And we would go there and we would do these trainings. And I would tell these 25, 30, 40 people would show up to these trainings because we knew the white supremacists were coming to the events to attempt to disrupt them. We knew they would be armed, and we knew they would be vicious, because that's who these people are. And so we had these trainings. They were conflict de-escalation trainings. And I would tell the people before every session, we will not be calling the police. And the reason why I would tell them that is because in these towns, we already knew the police, these what they call constitutional sheriffs. And if you know the one that was in Arizona, Joe Apaya, he was the, or whatever the hell his name was, he was the poster child of constitutional sheriffs, because they only believe in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. They're these militia sheriffs, right-wing militia sheriffs. They only believe in the first 10 amendments. They don't believe in the 13th and 14th Amendment, which means they don't believe that we're human beings. And they, of course, primarily believe in the Second Amendment, the gun amendment. That's really what their focus is. So these sheriffs were all constitutional sheriffs in these counties that we were doing these events in. And they would get on social media. They didn't care. They would get on social media and they would say things like, when these people come to town, we got something for them. This is what the police would say. When these people come here, we got something for them. And because I was the only African there, I was pretty visible. And so they would, on social media, that black man, his days are numbered. If you don't believe me, the group, the Rural Organizing Project, that's their name in Oregon, contact them. They'll verify for you what I'm saying. You think I'm just making it up? They'll tell you what I'm saying. So this is what happened. And we would tell these people, we're not calling the police. Well, well-intentioned people like you. Well, why are we not calling the police? That's what's there, that we pay tax dollars for them to protect us, blah, blah, blah. And we would explain to them what I just explained to you. So we're not calling the police. If something breaks out here, we're prepared and organized to deal with it. We're not calling the police, because the police are probably going to be the ones creating the problem. So you have got to ensure that everybody is on the same page about your work being independent from the capitalist system. That's a critical point, you all. Cannot be overstated. And if there's disagreement about that, you have got to flush that out before you can move further. You've got to make sure that your vision and your plan, everybody that you're working with is on the same page. And if you cannot resolve that with the people you're working with, then you have to agree to go your separate ways and do work independently by recruiting other people. But you cannot continue to move forward and ignore the fact that you have fundamental disagreements in the philosophical foundation of the work you're trying to do, because that is going to do nothing but create sabotage in what you're trying to do. If you're saying that we need to eliminate police and create community that can take care of each other, and they're saying, well, we need to hold the police accountable, that is not going to work, you all, because those are two completely different things. If you're saying that we need to eliminate patriarchal violence in our community, and we need to train women and women identifying people to lead that independent of the capitalist structures. And the other person is saying, well, we need to make sure that social services does its job properly. We need to make sure that, these people understand that we don't know if patriarchy is happening just because women say they were attacked. We need to hear, you got somebody saying something totally different. You are not going to be able to move forward. So you have got to resolve those contradictions. And if you're doing the things laid out in the book, like criticism, self-criticism, democratic centralism, then what you're building is a strong process of accountability where you can have these conversations in an honest fashion with people. And if you cannot agree, you can respectfully go your separate ways with the understanding that you're not going to attack each other. When people ask, well, why are you not working together? You tell them the truth, just because we just have philosophical disagreements. But I think that what they're doing is great. Go ahead and join them in accountability for the police. I don't believe in accountability for the police, but they do, and you do. So you join them, and you all, good luck to you in the work that you're doing. I don't believe that we can live without police, but you do, and they do. So you go, and good luck in the work that you're doing. That's principle work, you all. And if we can reach that level of work, then there's nothing the enemy can do to sabotage us, turn us against each other, and derail the work that we're doing. The enemy is on here listening. They can tell, but please speak up and make comments, police and all of you on here, and tell them that's true. If we don't help you, there's not really much you can do to sabotage us, because you are reliant on us turning against each other. So if you have that level of principle work happening, it's much more difficult for them to do that. And that only happens by you being able to have a foundation where you can flush out these disagreements. You can flush them out. And I just want to read comments. And, our comrade Evan again is saying that it's been really challenging when people say they don't want to join an organization. And yeah, that's true. And that's absolutely true. But then at the same time, we know that people, when they say that, they really mean they don't want to be accountable. They don't want to join any organization. It's not just big organizations. Like, show me somebody that says that, and I'll show you someone that doesn't want to be in any organization. And even someone that's in a small organization that believes that would never say something like that, because that person would understand that organization is important, and they wouldn't be hung up on the size of the organization. The only person thinking about those kind of things in that sort of bourgeoisie way is someone who's not involved in any organization and doesn't really understand anything about it. And then another comment from our comrade Ricks is that asking if the work study process, the political education process for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, is separate from joining the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And that's a wonderful question. And the answer is it's not separate, but you can join the work study process of the APRP and not be a member of the APRP. It is not required for you to be a member of the APRP to belong to an APRP work study process group. The work study is a program of the APRP. In fact, when you join work study, you are called that, work study. When you participate and you do the work to join, then you elevate to becoming pre-cadre, and eventually you become cadre, which is the title that I operate under. You do not join work study today and you're cadre today. That's not how it works. So you have to demonstrate that. Becoming a cadre, a revolutionary cadre, is not the same as becoming a Christian. If you can raise hell last night, Saturday night, and you can repent and you become a Christian today, and provided you, adhere to what you're repenting about, you're a Christian. That's not how becoming a revolutionary works, you all. It's a process. You have to demonstrate that. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying they're different. So that's the answer to those questions. And lastly, here, you have to have collective agreement on utilizing your political education tools to ensure you stay accountable to each other. And we've kind of addressed that through the course of this last hour, is that you have your whole purpose of your political education process is to strengthen the work that you're doing, to give it vitality, to give it teeth. That's what it's designed to do. So if you're utilizing the study process, you're studying, you're going over the materials with each other, you're studying them, you're debating, you're strengthening, you're sharpening your skills and analysis. And then you're using criticism, self-criticism, not as a weapon, but as a tool for you to raise up each other and support each other, because that's what it is. And you're using democratic centralism as a vehicle for democratic decision making. These things all used together properly will strengthen your organization. They'll strengthen your political work. They'll strengthen everything that you do. Okay. So, and then there's another question from Comrade Yolanda that's asking how do we get others to see value in hard work through accountability and integrity when so many organizers who are charismatic but stay surface level and not sustainable? Yeah, that's a very important point that you make, Yolanda. And what we will respond to that to say is that we, as Secretary said, quantity makes quality. So we continue to work, and we'll get better as we continue to work. And as we've done that over the years, one of the most important lessons that I've learned is that we don't need to look for, we don't, everybody's expendable. We're all going to die. So I'm not really concerned about if someone doesn't want to be accountable, that's not the person I want to organize with. So once I determine that, I'm moving to the next person. You want to get people around you who have a humble orientation, who are not driven by ego and centering themselves in the work. Anybody like that, that's not the people you want to try to organize with. You want to organize because they're not trying to build capacity for people to be free. They're trying to build something to advance themselves individually. And whoever of you who are on here who are like that, I'm talking to you. That's what you're trying to do. So you don't want to organize with people like that. You want to organize with people who recognize the things that we've been talking about. And then the next question is, how do you connect with a work study group? So we'll say that in just a moment as we close out. We appreciate that question, but collective agreement. And just want to say that, again, this is the first session, because I know some of you, like we have all these bourgeois notions in our head, you all. So you logged in and you're like, they didn't tell me anything about organizing, how to get something organized today. So I'm disappointed. But you don't, all these things we've talked about for the last hour, you don't have those in place, because if you did, you would be much farther along than we are right now. So this is a very important session, because without foundation, you can't move forward. And we're going to get into next week. If you look there, next week, it's organizing 101, step 2 or phase 2, the first stages of the work. Then we're going to talk about how you go into the neighborhoods and talk to people and do that. But you can't do any of that unless you do all the stuff we talk about today. That is a fact. That's irrefutable. So join us next week, same time, same channels for that. And then again, to answer that last question, you want to join an AAPRP work study circle, go to www.aaprp-intl.org. If you are African, you can do that, and we are happy to get you to join. We've seen such an uptick of people doing that, and we appreciate that, and we continue to want to work with you. But be serious. We want you to be prepared to read 5 pages a day. You do need to do that. We need you. Don't waste our time. Don't come here and then you're not going to read, and you want to just express your opinions. We're not here for that. We're not here for your egos. We're here to get free. So we want you to do that. At least do that. And then if you want to contact me, if you want to make death threats, there's a lot of them coming through lately. I always tell them, you get the first shot, make it count. A betterworld.me. Do that. Go there. You want to make death threats, that's the proper place to do it. So you can reach myself. You can contact me and Shakur through there. All of these videos are housed there, so you can see them afterwards if you want to do that. We want to thank Shan for saying always learning. Thank you. And forward ever. Thank you. And Yolanda said thank you for the information. Thank you. And then also just want to let you know we have a number of these broadcasts and programs happening. The APRP Pantula podcast with Comrade Evan, who I've mentioned on here, is involved with. You should look that up. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful podcast on a regular basis. The Forward Ever podcast is another APRP sponsored podcast. Look that up. The APRP New Mexico chapter has their weekly newscast at 11 a.m. Mountain Time every week. You definitely want to check out Comrade Onyesamu, Monica, Gabby, all the comrades there who are engaging in that. We are coming at you with political education, you all, and we want to invite you to come to African Liberation Day, May 22nd and 25th this year. It's going to be an international webcast. If you're going to be in Africa, we have actual on the ground events. We can tell you about that. Go to africanliberationday.net for more information there. And of course, buy the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I did not write this book just for people to read it and gain information for intellectual conversation while you have a glass of wine and you're eating cheese on toothpicks. That's not why I wrote this book. I wrote this book so people could use it to get together, to organize so that we can get free. So please get the book for that purpose. We will use whatever money comes from. I haven't seen a dime from the book, but if I ever do, whatever money comes from that book, we will use it to continue to do this work like we've been doing for almost 40 years. You cannot refute that. That's irrefutable. We are dedicated to this work. Please come back next week and join us. Forward ever, backwards never. Always stay clever in any endeavor. One unified socialist Africa is our objective. Smash patriarchy in any form or shape that it exists. Smash homophobia in any form, shape that it exists. Smash white supremacy in any form, shape, or exist. Capitalism, y'all already know, it's got to go. Have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you here next week.